People who were alive then, what were you doing December 31st, 1999? I was working that night. I worked at a hardware store, and my boss wanted a couple of guys to stay at the store in case anything went wrong, hell if I knew what to do if anything did. So me and this other guy drank whiskey, listened to tunes, played cards and video games in the store. Midnight came and went, nothing happened. Our boss came by around 12:30 and paid us $500 each in cash, and then I went to a house party until 5 in the morning. Worth it. I was a broke-ass college student in 1999, $500 back then was a gold mine. Even now, 500 ain't nothing to scoff at. I'd go suck a dick right now for $500. Unzips pants edit, well, my top comment is about me buying sex. Great. Checks bank account, rezips pants. Checks student loans, puts on more pants edit, wow this blew up. Edit, wow this blew up. Student loans and more pants, how could you qualify for loans if you can afford extra pants? S. Millennials can't afford houses or healthcare because they're spending all their money on extra pants. I specifically remember going on to Wonka.com to play Umpa's Outrageous Rush because I was scared the Millennium bug would wipe out the site. Kids these days don't appreciate the bullet we dodged. Yeah, but they have the 2038 problem to look forward to. Much bigger issue than Y2K. God only knows how many embedded 32-bit systems are out there. And we're still making more. Holy shit. I feel like this presents an Office Space-like situation where he just has to go over every digit and change it. My best friend and I set up a Batcave in my bedroom. We were 14. We somehow managed to get 6 televisions and 2 computers in my room, stacked them up and proceeded to play Zelda 64 on one, Donkey Kong Country on another, threw a movie on the third, then all 3 local channels just in case something happened. Then we ate a bunch of candy and Ben Jerry's before falling asleep. That sounds like a killer time at 14. I mean, it sounds like a killer time to me at 32. 39 here. Sign me up. I spent the day as part of an emergency response team for Y2K for the company I work for. Basically, I was in a conference room for 13 hours, counting down midnight across multiple time zones, waiting for something to break. None of our equipment broke, so basically I sat in a room bored to death counting down Y2K about a dozen times that day, so counting it down again didn't hold much interest for me. I went to my GF's house and went to sleep before midnight in our own time zone. We were Y2K compliant. I was responsible for checking that for months ahead of time, and I was on duty at the plant. We had only one issue with Jan 01 19100. An old DOS machine that didn't matter. I still have the printout from its daily report somewhere. We had only one issue with Jan 01 19100. An old DOS machine that didn't matter. I still have the printout from its daily report somewhere. Welcome to the world of tomorrow. Well, thanks for making us feel old. Seriously. Those who were alive back then, as if it wasn't less than 20 years ago. It's weird to think that there are people interacting on this site that weren't alive in '99. Doesn't seem that long ago really. I was alive back then, but I was 4 years old, so I don't really remember. I was 11. I lived in a very, very rural part of Ireland at the time. Nothing around us except fields and forests and the coast behind us. I was babysitting my little brother and sister whilst my mom and stepdad went out to the nearest town to celebrate it. I stayed up until midnight, and instead of watching the TV with all the fireworks and celebrations, I went outside, climbed onto the house roof and watched the stars for a while. I didn't even check when it ticked over to the year 2000. I stayed up there for about 15 minutes drinking in the few rare silences of this new millennium. Climbed back down, had a hot chocolate, checked on my siblings and went to bed. Edit, well duck me this blew up. For all those saying I'm not Irish because I call my mother mom and not ma'am, you're right, I'm not Irish, I'm English. We moved there for a few years with my mom's fella who is Irish who found work there. My house was a bungalow, so climbing the roof was easy. I wasn't drinking, in the silence I was drinking in the silence, as in taking it in. For all those asking where I lived, it was Mayo, just a little outside of a town called Lewisburg. It was amazing. I suggest anyone who wants to see Ireland to go. It's beautiful. And yes, my username is in relation to my time in Ireland, as when I moved back to Britain as a teenager and told my new friends my nickname suddenly became Leprechaun, or Lepers for short. Partying like it was 1999. Drinking for the Y2K apocalypse. My grandma was a believer in Y2K and completely retrofitted her house in preparation. She had essentially a concrete bunker built in her backyard, large enough to hold her whole extended family, albeit we're a very small family, that was fully powered by solar and wind power. A well was dug to provide fresh water, and the storm cellar was lined with canned food to sustain us for several years. It's fun to laugh at it, but at the same time I'm glad to know the place exists only a few hours north of me if something apocalyptic ever were to happen. We had just moved to a new town for a new job and finally were out of poverty. The Christmas before we thought we had a future after years of struggling. I was pregnant. My husband had just gotten employment. Then right before Christmas my husband was laid off and we lost our insurance. We spent the next few months on survival mode. Baby was born in emergency circumstances which, thanks to Medicaid, turned out well. We were granted food stamps which gave us a 2-month bumper we didn't have before. Summer of 1999, when we had $200 in our pocket and nothing more, we were finally offered this job. We took a loan to move and my Phil co-signed it. He told us to never ask that of him again. By Christmas of 1999 we had money in the bank. We actually had a Christmas. We had told my Phil that we'd pay back that loan within a year even though we had 3. We accomplished that and were never prouder. Near 20 years later we own a home, a couple practical well-running vehicles, have savings, and carry no debt. That New Year's we stayed home in the bad apartment we had to move to at first, grateful and happy. 2000 was the start of a better life for my family. I had been involved in a serious accident wherein I lost consciousness and a lot of blood. I was in the ER in hospital for quite some time. When I got out I had forgotten what day it was and then it was New Year's. We drove back to a small trailer where we were vacationing. A large tractor truck pulling a flatbed trailer was driving by. On the trailer was about 20 drunk people with all kinds of New Year's Eve jewelry and flair. I was so confused until I heard them counting down and then seeing all the fireworks. Edit, oh my god. I never did wake up. That's the reason why my life is amazing? Because I'm inventing it as I lay in a hospital bed? No. So I was pretty young at the time, but I remember my cousins and I really wanted to stay up for New Year's. My mom, aunt, and uncle didn't really want us staying up, and my dad needed to go into the office at about 11 so that he was there at midnight to make sure everything was okay. So they came up with a plan. My aunt, uncle, and cousins come the day before or the morning of New Year's Eve, and my cousins and I played all morning early afternoon. In the middle of the afternoon, my dad and uncle took us to a movie. While we were gone, my mom and aunt changed all the clocks in the house. So when we got home, we thought it was several hours later than it actually was. When our clocks hit midnight we celebrated New Year's and went to bed pretty soon after. I didn't find this out until years later. So for years, I thought I had stayed up to until midnight to watch New Year's when I had really celebrated it a few hours early and then slept through it. Party on the dark because at the stroke of midnight someone plugged one too many things in. We thought that Y2K had actually happened. I was 12 years old and the family New Year's Eve party was at our house that year. Earlier in the day, my dad showed me the main breaker in the garage and told me to run in and pull it right at midnight. I did and went back to where everyone was and nobody seemed to notice or care. It was all a ploy to get you out of the house for the party. Getting drunk with cousins on stolen liquor and dancing to Dre's Chronic 2001, DMX's Flesh of My Flesh, and the Slim Shady LP in the basement of the mountain house that the family had stocked with food and firearms, just in case. We also went sledding at like 10 at night because the moon was so bright and the parents were too drunk to complain. Edit Silver? Please tell me that doesn't cost money? I love how your parents were worried about the Y2K thing to the point they got a house in the mountains and filled it with weapons, but not so worried they couldn't get shit-faced. My brother's father's family, to be precise. They were all third-generation immigrant working class, and either college-educated or well-paid tradesmen. Firearms were always around where I grew up. Imagine 60,000 poor, working, and middle-class Irish, Italian, and Polish people in row homes in an original American city. That was our neighborhood, the neighborhood. I know it seems crazy without context, but when you grow up witnessing race riots and gang wars, the threat of Y2K triggering a breakdown in the social order doesn't seem so far-fetched.